everyone. Welcome back to our last week of learning. We're going to do assignments this week, finish up this unit, and then we are going to have some review work, and then we're going to take a final exam, and then we're done. Woo, woo. This set of notes is really fun, especially if you enjoy art. Today we are going to look at the Renaissance. So let's get started. The Middle Ages, the time period we've been talking about for the past, I don't even know now, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, officially kind of comes to an end at the Renaissance. So the Middle Ages last from the fall of the Roman Empire to the Renaissance. Everything in between that is considered the Middle Ages, hence the middle. What is a Renaissance? The word Renaissance means rebirth in French. It's actually pronounced Renaissance, but we're not that fancy. I only know that because I took like 8 years of French. Obviously meaning to do again. Naissance means birth. So, rebirth. What is being reborn? What is being reborn is our focus on what we might call the finer things of life. Art, learning, education. We turn back to books. We're not so focused on mere survival like we were in the Middle Ages. Everything is starting to become more structured again. We are safer again. And so we have free time and energy to return to, like I said, those things that we enjoy. Art in various forms, painting, sculpture, written work like plays, poems, and just in general education and learning new things and moving forward. So that's what's being reborn during this time. The main center of the Renaissance is Italy, although it is found through much of Europe as well. But Italy is famous for being the kind of lead center of this kind of rebirth. They have a couple of connections as to why they become the center of the Renaissance. They have that strong connection to ancient Roman history, all of the beautiful Roman statues, Roman architecture, and all of those plays and, mathematical advancements and all kinds of advancements that we had going on during the height of the Roman civilization. So they have a connection to that. The three main city-states that we talk about for the Renaissance are Venice, Florence, and Genoa. I have been to 2 of those, and I strongly recommend, especially Venice, because it's basically going to be underwater soon. Yes. Italy was not a unified country yet. That's why I'm saying city-states here. So it was broken up into smaller chunks. It gets unified later, but not in our class. It gets unified in World History 2. These city-states become very powerful through their trade connections. We talked about this when we talked about Rome. The Italian peninsula is smack in the middle of everything. It's in a perfect location. It's right between what's going on in Europe and the Middle East and Africa as it starts to enter the trading world. It's connected to the Silk Road. It's on the Mediterranean. And just in general, it's a really, really nice place to be. So all of these city-states become very powerful and very rich through these trade connections. And like I said before, they're most of the locations of where the art is, both the old Roman art and then as a result, our new Renaissance art. Art changes during this time. During the Middle Ages, almost all of the art was of religious people and religious events. That starts to turn a little bit during the Renaissance. Now, I'm going to show you religious art from the Renaissance, so it doesn't completely go away, but it takes on some more humanistic components. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Ms. Dodge, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you. What is humanism? Humanism is the focus on everyday, average people instead of divine or religious figures. Okay, so work used to include Jesus or the disciples or other people featured in the Christian Bible. Humanism instead focuses on regular people, right? Like a painting of me. Okay, that would be kind of humanistic. It also focuses on classical Greek and Roman style. So if you were to compare Renaissance art and Roman art, you'd see some quite a few actually similarities. Humanism is kind of characterized by this like patron system. What is a patron? A patron today means something a little different. It just means customer. But in the Renaissance, a patron was somebody who was very rich who ordered art. Okay. I'm sure we've all heard the whole, starving artist kind of stereotype. Back in the Renaissance, people with a lot of money who enjoyed art would go to a painter they liked and they would order a piece and they would say, "Hey, I really like the work you've done. I would like you to paint me a picture that I can put above my fireplace." And that patron might say, I want it to be of me. That patron might say, I want it to, be a nature scene or whatever. They would say kind of what they wanted, and then that artist would go and do it. So that's what patrons are. And it's really because of them that we have the work that we do. Otherwise, these artists during the Renaissance wouldn't have been able to afford to make these pieces of work that they did and save them. So that's kind of why we have this Renaissance, really. This is mostly in here for the SOL, which you guys aren't taking. They sometimes mention Petrarch. He's called the father of humanism. He doesn't really do anything else. But like I said, I put that in there because the SOL usually asks about his name in relation to the Renaissance. So I try and at least have that semi-recognizable in your head. Let's look at some art. So we're going to look at two artists from the Renaissance, two of the very famous artists, and you probably have heard of them. First, we're going to look at Mr. Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, two of his famous paintings are the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper. Here he is. Stylish, I guess. So let's look at these paintings of his. First is the Mona Lisa, probably something that you recognized. A very, very famous painting. A lot of people don't know that it's actually really quite a small painting. It's only like something like 2.5 feet, 3 feet by like 2 feet. It's really not a large painting. A lot of people seem to think it is, but it's not. If we were in class, I'd have you get up and walk through the class and do this. But right now, I want you to pause this video and watch her eyes move from side to side, or move your computer or whatever you're using to watch this. Move the computer from side to side. Her eyes always look like they're looking at you. You can do it up and down too, right? And just move your computer side to side and look at it from different angles. And she looks like she's staring at you no matter where you turn your computer. It's actually really creepy. This isn't the best quality picture you can see, but it does the trick, and it's kind of creepy. So yeah, try it. We actually don't know who she is. We have our art historians have some guesses, but we're not entirely sure who she is. Based on her clothing, some people think she might have been pregnant. They think she might have been Leonardo da Vinci's like girlfriend. Some people think it might have been his neighbor. We're not entirely sure, who she is and what her deal is, but a very, very famous painting. The next painting is The Last Supper. Okay, a much larger painting. This painting is like 30 feet long. I'm not joking, and it's like 15 feet tall. So that's pretty much like, think about like the wall of my classroom, right? The front where the whiteboard and the smartboard is. Picture that, literally the whole wall covered with this painting. That's a pretty good idea of how large this painting is. It is humongous. Very, very large painting. Again, also by Leonardo da Vinci. This is showing The Last Supper. before Jesus was arrested to be put on trial because they didn't like Christians back then. But this is kind of dives into more of like a realistic looking painting. We will do some review before our final exam of different art styles. The Middle Ages art is very almost cartoon like. It's very clearly not a photograph. It is, I guess cartoon is the best kind of description I have for it. And when we see some of the pieces of art, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is a very realistic looking painting. We can still tell that it is a painting, but it has a lot more realistic components to it. Look at the tablecloth. He's even painted in the creases of how the tablecloth was folded up before it was laid out. Each of the wrinkles in the clothing. Okay. He also does this kind of, actually, I don't know the art term for it, but it's like forced perspective or something like that. Everything slants in so that it looks like it gives the painting depth. Like you look like you're looking into this room, even though it's on a flat piece of paper. And that's a very skillful technique, right? You can see, like I said, everything's pointing in, and it looks like you're taking a peek inside this room, even though you're really looking at a flat piece of canvas that somebody's just slapped some paint on. So this is the Last Supper, very, very famous. It also gets into this whole thing about like the Holy Grail, which is like supposedly the cup that Jesus drank, and some people say it's actually this part, which is like her, this is Mary Magdalene, they think, and that it was Jesus' wife, and that Jesus had babies and stuff. Anyway, that's a whole art conspiracy, or just, I guess, a regular conspiracy. I'm getting off topic, yikes. The Last Supper. Another artist that we want to talk about is Michelangelo. Not a super happy looking guy over here, which maybe just a bad picture of him. Have you noticed we've talked about 2 of the Ninja Turtles? Wow. Michelangelo is famous for his sculpture of David and his paintings on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So let's look at David first. Here is the sculpture of David. I had to give him some short, school appropriate. He is a biblical hero, a biblical figure. So like I said, it's not that none of the Renaissance pieces were religious figures. It was just more of a turn away from that as a dominant source of subjects. So this is David, very, very famous. Also very, very large. I think he's like 8 feet tall. Like this part of him, and then this is also the pedestal that he's saying. It's a huge. It might actually be more than 8 feet tall. Let me look and see, because I feel like he's really tall. How tall is David? David is 17 feet tall. 17 feet tall. That's very tall. To give you perspective, a regular sized human is usually somewhere between 5 and 6 feet tall, and he's 7 feet tall. So 17 feet tall. So a regular human would probably be like up to his knee, maybe a little higher. All right, that's a tall statue. The other piece of artwork from Michelangelo is the Sistine Chapel. This is one of the most famous sections of the paintings of the Sistine Chapel. This is the creation of man. So this is Adam over here, and then this is supposed to be God and angels and stuff. And he's coming and giving the like life spark to humans, basically creating humans, putting life on earth. The Sistine Chapel is humongous. Okay, this is what the Sistine Chapel looks like. It is huge and very decorated. It's in Rome. You can go and visit. You can see how high the ceilings are. All of this is painted. All of this is all painted by Michelangelo. It took him about 4 years to paint all of this. And we believe he went blind after painting this because of the lead paint dripping into his eyes. You can see if I can find it up here. This looks like a scene from the Garden of Eden. These are all biblical things. And you can see right here is the picture I just showed you. There's Adam. Right? So there's that. It is huge. Oh, can we go up? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Ooh, that's making me dizzy. What's it doing? So you can see how large this ceiling is, and how detailed all of this painting, all of this artwork is. It would take me a lot longer than 4 years to do all that. So that's the Sistine Chapel. Like I said, you can go and visit. It's in Rome. I've been there. It's usually really crowded. They tell you to be silent and also don't take pictures, but everybody breaks those rules. Whoops. All right, so those are some of our famous paintings from the Renaissance. As I said, Italy is the center of Renaissance. It's the main focus of the Renaissance, but it spreads farther than Italy as well. It heads up into Northern Europe, where it focuses more on Christianity than the Italian Renaissance, but it's still very much also humanistic. Something else we do care about the Northern Renaissance for, though, is there one major invention that completely changes the way people communicate, and that is the movable type printing press. Okay, so we've talked about printing presses before. The first version of the printing press comes out of China, but this is a big improvement here as to the printing press. So the old printing press, what you have to do every time you wanted to print a page of a book, you would have to go and get a piece of wood and carve the page onto the wood. And you have to make sure that it was flipped, because when you put it down on paper, it's going to be backwards of the way you carved it in. It's a very time-consuming process to carve each page out of wood for everything you wanted to print. And every single time you have a large book, right? Think about how many pages are in, your textbooks, right? Or even the Bible, if you know. There's hundreds and hundreds of pages. That's a lot of work that goes into creating the blank type of the printing press. The change during the Northern Renaissance was the movable type printing press. Now, here's a big thing that people always get confused for some reason. A lot of people see the word movable and they think that the whole printing press could move from place to place. That's untrue. Printing presses are usually very large. They usually take up much of a whole room, okay? This is not a portable printer. This isn't a printer you take with you and print things on the go. What's movable about this printing press is the letters. So instead of carving out each individual page, you put together little individual letters and you slide them into a template. And when you're done printing that page, you can take all the letters back out and use them again. Okay? So think about like letter magnets on a refrigerator. That's a version of mobile type printing press. Okay, obviously you're not printing that, you're just putting it up on the refrigerator for people to see for a couple days. But that's what I mean by movable type. You can move the letters around to spell "we need eggs." And then you can take those same letters, move them around again, and spell something else. You don't have to throw out the letters because you've already used them. So that's what it is. The movable type, meaning movable letters. That's what's moving around. Okay. The kind of lead guy for this his name is Johann Gutenberg. What a name. He's from what ends up being Germany. It's not Germany at the time. But anyway, he's the one that develops this printing press with letters and common words that can be moved. So instead of always needing to go find the T and then the H and then the E, you could have a pre-put together the or and or I or be, right? Words that are very, very common. You'd have those put together, but you'd have separate individual letters for less common words that you needed for printing. Okay, and then like I said, these can be moved around in any order and then taken apart when you're done and reused on another page. It's a little hard to wrap our heads around, right, because we haven't seen either of these things. But this type of printing press, moving these letters and words around, makes printing so much easier and quicker because we don't have to carve an entire page every single time we want to print something. We can just move some letters around together really quick, spell them out like letters on a refrigerator, print what we need to print, and then put them away for next time. Because it's easier, because it's quicker, it means it's cheaper. Okay, this makes books and things that are printed very, very cheap to purchase. They don't cost a lot of money, which means people are able to afford more books, people buy books, and we have a greater spread of information amongst average people. I love to read. I love to read very much. Right now I'm reading a book about female pharaohs in ancient Egypt. It's fascinating. I really like that book. But if that book cost $400, I'm probably not going to buy that book. I'd really like to know what's inside the book, but I don't want to spend $400 on a book. But since it's quick and cheap and easy to print with movable type, now that book is only $15, $20. Much more of a reasonable price. I can afford that book and I can learn about these famous female pharaohs from ancient Egypt, and now I know more than I knew before. So making books more accessible to more people means that more people can read, more people can learn, and more people can be educated. Okay? Some of our major books, we have 3 that we need to talk about. First is The Praise of Folly, written by Erasmus. This is a book, this is very humanistic. It basically makes fun of like the classic good Christian stereotype. The main character is named Folly, and all of the characters are like abstract. Like he'll meet like greed, and he'll meet um, piety, and those they're like personality traits kind of. It's an interesting book, but he's kind of making fun of this stereotypical good Christian going through life, but he has kind of a horrible life, but he keeps trying to be a good Christian, and it's kind of a weird, sad book. But it's very famous at the time because people are turning towards humanism, turning towards being more critical of religion instead of blindly following what the church decrees, right? That's left over from the Crusades. People start to distrust church leaders. The Pope told us to go and try and get Jerusalem back, and it was a total disaster, so maybe the Pope doesn't know what he's talking about. The next book is Utopia by Sir Thomas More, and it describes like the most perfect society, right? He says, well, if everything were perfect, right, in a perfect world, this is what it would look like. He describes how the laws are made, he describes what people do every day, and how the situation works. Even today, we use the word utopia to describe something that's very perfect, right? Oh, I just went on this tropical vacation. I was on the beach all day, delicious food, great weather. It was utopia, right? So people will use that word sometimes to describe something that is just absolutely perfect. The last one is kind of interesting. This one is called The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. That is a good Italian name, right? You gotta put that accent in. Niccolo Machiavelli. The Prince is a book. It's a study of government, hence the name Prince. And Machiavelli's got some interesting ideas about how government should work. Niccolo Machiavelli says leaders should have absolute power. He says leaders should be able to do whatever they want. Yikes. He also says that the ends justify the means. Let's talk about what this phrase means here. The ends refers to like the results of something. To justify something means to make it okay. And then the means here is referring to how you get something done. So the results make okay how you got there, basically. That wasn't great grammatical structure, right? So let me give you an example. According to Machiavelli, the ends justify the means. So, according to Machiavelli, it would be okay for you to wow, I'm drawing a blank. It would be okay for you to steal food as long as you were feeding your family that was going to starve. Okay? So the end, feeding your family that was going to starve, the end result makes it okay that you stole from somebody. Right? Now that's one that a lot of us could say, yeah, you're probably right. I would probably steal to feed my family. If my family were starving, absolutely I would steal to keep them alive. But then it gets a little, ugh. So, right? Sometimes it gets a little, yikes. It's okay, according to Machiavelli, it's okay to murder 10,000 people who are trying to invade your town. The end, saving your town from being invaded, according to Machiavelli, makes it okay that you murdered 10,000 people. Okay? I'll give us a more real-world example and see how we feel about this. According to Machiavelli, it would be okay to kill every person who got coronavirus in order to protect everyone else. The ends, trying to protect society from coronavirus, makes it okay that you murdered, what are we up to now? Like 100,000 people? Is it okay to murder 100,000 people? Right? And that's a thinker right there. I know some of us say, well, if it saves everyone else, right? But some of us say, well, you can't just willy-nilly murder 1,000 people. Right? So that's what this it's a little shaky here. It's definitely a philosophical idea or an ethical idea, right? It really makes you sit down and think and go, what is right? What is the right thing here? Okay. And then lastly, one of Machiavelli's principles, he says, do good when possible, but do evil when necessary. So if you can be a good person, but if you have to, be a bad person. Right? So he's definitely okay with people doing evil things if I have to do it. Right? Which is a little scary here because he also thinks leaders should have absolute power. So that means leaders can be evil whenever they feel like they have to. Yikes. So definitely an interesting thing. If any of you are interested in philosophy and all kinds of stuff like that, you would probably like The Prince. If you go into philosophy in college, right, you'll probably end up reading The Prince and have a debate about that and that kind of stuff. It definitely is a very interesting book, I guess is the best word I have for it. All right, that's it for these notes. We have one more set of notes this week, and then we're just going to start diving in and reviewing for our final exam. Goodbye.